The Galactic Trade Station Nexus 7 hummed with activity as beings from dozens of species conducted their daily business. Towering crystal formations housed the elegant Zephyrians, their translucent bodies shimmering as they negotiated shipping contracts. Heavily armored Kraxan warriors stomped through the corridors, their metal boots clanging against the polished floors. In the shadowy corners, the snake-like Vorthak whispered among themselves, their forked tongues tasting the recycled air for information and opportunity. Among all these impressive alien species, one small section of the station drew constant ridicule and disdain. The human quarter, as it was mockingly called, consisted of a handful of cramped workshops and living spaces where the newest members of the galactic community tried to make their way in a universe that clearly considered them inferior. Marcus Chun wiped the grease from his hands with a worn cloth as he emerged from beneath the belly of a Zephyrian cargo hauler. The elegant aliens had brought their ship to him only because his prices were half of what any respectable alien mechanic would charge. They stood nearby, their crystalline forms refracting the workshop's harsh lights into rainbow patterns across the walls. Human, one of the Zephyrians spoke, its voice like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. Your species continues to amaze us with your persistence. Despite your obvious limitations, you somehow managed to keep our vessels functional. Marcus straightened up, standing barely 5.5 feet tall compared to the 7-foot aliens. His coveralls were stained with a dozen different types of alien machinery fluids, and his dark hair was perpetually disheveled. To anyone observing, he looked exactly like what the galaxy expected from humanity: small, dirty, and utterly unremarkable. The hyperdrive coupling was just loose, Marcus replied evenly, though his jaw tightened slightly. Standard maintenance, really. Should run smooth for another 10,000 light years. The second Zephyrian made a sound that might have been laughter. Standard maintenance. How charmingly simple your understanding is. Tell me, human, do you even comprehend the quantum resonance matrices that make faster-than-light travel possible? Marcus looked up at the alien, his brown eyes steady. I understand enough to fix your ship when it breaks down. This statement caused both Zephyrians to emit that chiming laugh again. The first one gestured toward its companion with one of its 4 graceful arms. Such confidence from such a primitive species. Your people have been in space for what, barely 200 years? We have been traveling the stars for over 50,000. And yet, Marcus said quietly, sliding out from under the ship and standing up, here you are in my workshop. The Zephyrians' laughter stopped abruptly. Their crystalline faces, while alien, somehow managed to convey offense. The first one spoke again, its voice now carrying an edge like breaking glass. We are here only because your desperation makes you cheap, human. Do not mistake economic convenience for respect. They paid Marcus in the lowest denomination galactic credits and left without another word, their graceful forms gliding out of his cramped workshop with obvious disdain. Marcus watched them go, then returned to his workbench where a dozen other repair jobs waited. This was his life now, 3 years after humanity had finally achieved faster-than-light travel and joined the galactic community. Every species seemed to have a different reason for looking down on humans, but they all shared the same basic contempt. The Kraxan considered humans physically weak. The Vorthak found human psychology simple and predictable. The Ethereals believed human technology was laughably primitive. Even the peaceful Malari, with their flower-like faces and gentle demeanor, treated humans like adorable but ultimately useless pets. As Marcus worked on a Kraxan battlecruiser's targeting system, he listened to the conversations that drifted through his workshop's thin walls. The aliens rarely bothered to lower their voices around humans, assuming they either couldn't understand or simply didn't matter enough to worry about. The humans are requesting membership in the Defense Coalition again, rumbled a Kraxan voice from the corridor outside. Again, this was a Vorthak, its sibilant tones making the words sound like a threat. What could they possibly contribute? Their largest warships are smaller than our scouts. Their manufacturing capabilities are adequate, the Kraxen admitted grudgingly. But their military doctrine is primitive. They still use kinetic weapons and explosive warheads. No energy shields, no quantum disruptors. They would be slaughtered in any real conflict. Perhaps that is the point. The Vorthack replied with what Marcus had learned was their version of humor. Let them think they are contributing while keeping them safely away from any actual combat. The voices moved away down the corridor, but their words lingered in Marcus's mind. This was the reality of humanity's place in the galaxy. They were tolerated, barely, as a source of cheap labor and raw materials. No one expected them to amount to anything more. Marcus had been working for 6 hours straight when the alarm klaxons began blaring throughout the station. The piercing sound was followed immediately by an automated announcement in 17 different languages, including the slightly stilted version in Earth Standard English. Attention, all station personnel. Emergency docking protocols are now in effect. All civilians are to remain in designated safe areas until further notice. Marcus looked up from the plasma conduit he'd been repairing, frowning. Emergency docking protocols were rarely used except for ships carrying dangerous cargo or vessels in severe distress. He wiped his hands and made his way to the small viewport in his workshop's wall. What he saw made him step back in amazement. The ship approaching Nexus 7 was unlike anything he'd ever seen before. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of the largest vessels that normally docked at the station. But size wasn't what made it remarkable. The ship appeared to be organic, its hull rippling with what looked like scales that shifted color from deep emerald to brilliant gold as it moved. Massive wings were folded against its sides, and its front end tapered to what could only be described as a head with enormous, intelligent eyes. "By the void," Marcus whispered. "It's alive." As the creature ship approached the station, Marcus could see smaller vessels escorting it. These he recognized as Draconic Federation ships, with their distinctive swept-wing design and scales-pattern hull plating. The Draconic Federation was legendary throughout the galaxy, spoken of in whispers even by the most arrogant species. The dragons, as they were commonly known, were ancient beyond measure. They had been traveling the stars when most species were still discovering fire. Their technology was so advanced it seemed like magic to everyone else. More importantly, they were powerful enough that even the mighty Kraxen spoke carefully in their presence. But dragons rarely left their home systems, and when they did, it was never for anything trivial. Marcus had never seen one in person, and from what he'd heard, few beings in the galaxy had. As the living ship settled into the station's largest docking bay, Marcus could see crowds gathering at viewports throughout Nexus 7. Even normally composed Zephyrians were pressing against windows to get a better look. The Kraxen warriors had formed formal honor guards in the corridors, and the Vorthack had practically disappeared into the shadows, which Marcus knew meant they were nervous. The announcement system crackled to life again, this time with a different tone entirely. The voice belonged to Station Commander Thylex, a Kraxen whose authority was absolute within Nexus 7's boundaries. "All station personnel, we are honored to welcome representatives of the Draconic Federation to Nexus 7. All normal operations will continue, but all beings are reminded to show proper respect to our distinguished guests." Marcus snorted softly. Proper respect from the Kraxen usually meant avoiding eye contact and getting out of the way quickly. He could imagine how they would treat actual dragons. For the next hour, Marcus tried to focus on his work, but the excitement throughout the station was impossible to ignore. He kept hearing footsteps in the corridor outside, voices speaking in hushed, reverent tones. Several times, he saw groups of aliens hurrying past his workshop's entrance, all heading toward the main docking bay. When his curiosity finally got the better of him, Marcus set down his tools and made his way through the station's corridors toward the docking bay. He had to push through crowds of onlookers, all trying to catch a glimpse of the dragon delegation. The docking bay was enormous, easily the size of a small city block, but the living ship dominated it entirely. Up close, Marcus could see that its scales weren't just changing color. They were breathing, rising and falling in a slow, steady rhythm. The creature's eyes, each one larger than Marcus himself, gazed out at the assembled crowd with an intelligence that was both ancient and profound. Near the creature's head, a section of its neck had opened like a flower, revealing a ramp that led into its interior. Standing at the base of the ramp were three figures that made Marcus's breath catch in his throat. The dragons were humanoid in basic shape, but everything about them spoke of power and grace that no other species possessed. They stood nearly 8 feet tall, their bodies covered in scales that shifted through the same color spectrum as their ship. Their faces were elegantly reptilian, with large eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of millennia. Each one wore robes that appeared to be woven from starlight itself, and the air around them seemed to shimmer with barely contained energy. The one in the center stepped forward, and the entire crowd of onlookers fell silent. When it spoke, its voice carried to every corner of the massive docking bay without the aid of amplification. "Greetings, beings of Nexus 7. I am Zareth, voice of the Inner Circle, speaking for the Draconic Federation. We come seeking aid in a matter of great urgency." Station Commander Thylex stepped forward, his usual arrogance replaced by careful deference. "Great Zareth, Nexus 7 and all its resources are at your disposal. Whatever aid you require, we will provide." Zareth's great eyes swept across the assembled crowd, and Marcus felt a chill run down his spine when that ancient gaze passed over him. For just a moment, he had the unsettling feeling that the dragon had seen right through him, understanding things about him that he didn't even know himself. "Our youngest, Skyweaver, has been grievously injured," Zareth continued. "She attempted to explore an ancient derelict ship we discovered in the void between stars. The vessel contained technology we do not recognize, and it has somehow interfaced with her biological systems in a way that our healers cannot reverse." A murmur ran through the crowd. If the dragons, with all their advanced knowledge and technology, couldn't solve a problem, what hope did anyone else have? "The foreign technology is spreading through her systems," Zareth said, and for the first time, Marcus heard something like worry in the ancient being's voice. "Our healers estimate she has perhaps 10 cycles before it reaches her core consciousness. If that happens, we will lose her forever." Commander Thylex straightened to his full impressive height. "Great Zareth, I will immediately contact our finest medical facilities. The Zephyrian healing centers have technology that we have already consulted with the Zephyrians," Zareth interrupted gently but firmly, "as well as the Ethereal Science Consortium, the Craxan Military Medical Corps, and a dozen other institutions. All have examined our young one. All have declared the problem beyond their capabilities." The dragon's gaze swept across the crowd again, and this time Marcus was certain those ancient eyes paused on him for longer than the others. "We seek not advanced medicine or sophisticated technology. We seek understanding. Someone who can look at the intersection of two incompatible systems and find a way to make them work together." Marcus felt his heart starting to beat faster. That description sounded exactly like what he did every day in his workshop, taking alien technology that wasn't designed to work with human tools and making it function anyway. "We seek," Zareth continued, "a mechanic." The words seemed to hang in the air for a long moment. Then Commander Thylex stepped forward again, his voice carefully respectful but confused. "Great Zareth, surely you cannot mean? We have several excellent technicians on staff. Master Engineer Vexoth of the Zephyrians has over 3 centuries of experience with biomechanical integration. Chief Mechanic Gorth of the Craxan has modified more ships than any being in this sector." "We have consulted with both," Zareth replied. "Their expertise is vast, but it follows predictable patterns. The technology affecting our young one responds to known patterns. We need someone who thinks differently." Marcus realized he was stepping forward even before he made the conscious decision to do so. The crowd parted around him, and he could feel hundreds of eyes turning in his direction. The whispers started immediately. "A human. Is he insane? Someone stop him before he embarrasses us all. But Marcus kept walking until he stood before the three dragons, his head tilted back to meet Zareth's ancient gaze. This close, he could feel the power radiating from the dragon like heat from a forge, but he forced himself to stand steady. "I'm Marcus Chun," he said, his voice sounding small in the vast space, but carrying clearly in the sudden silence. "I fix things that aren't supposed to work together." Zareth studied him for a long moment, those alien eyes seeming to look directly into his soul. Finally, the dragon spoke. "You are very young, Marcus Chun, and very small. What makes you believe you can succeed where beings with centuries of experience have failed?" Marcus thought about the question seriously before answering. Around him, he could feel the contempt and amusement of the watching crowd. The same contempt he faced every day in his workshop. The same assumptions about human limitations that he'd been proving wrong one repair job at a time. Because, he said finally, when you've got the best technology in the galaxy, you think in terms of how things should work. When you've got to make do with whatever you can find, you think in terms of how things could work. Maybe what your friend needs isn't better technology. Maybe she needs someone who's used to making do with less. The silence stretched on for what felt like an eternity. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears and feel sweat beginning to form on his palms. He'd either just volunteered for the most important job of his life or made a complete fool of himself in front of the entire station. Then, Zareth nodded slowly. "An interesting perspective. Very well. Marcus Chun, who fixes things that aren't supposed to work together. Will you come aboard, Skyweaver, and see if your different way of thinking can help where conventional wisdom has failed?" The crowd erupted in shocked whispers and protests. Marcus could hear Commander Thylex's voice rising above the others, something about humans not being qualified for such important work. But all of that faded into background noise as Marcus looked up at the dragon, who was offering him a chance to prove that humans were more than just the galaxy's comic relief. "Yes," he said simply. "I'll help." Zareth's expression might have been the dragon equivalent of a smile. "Then come, let us see what the universe's most underestimated species can accomplish." As Marcus followed the three dragons up the ramp into their living ship, he could hear the stunned conversations behind him growing louder. He didn't look back. For the first time since humanity had joined the galactic community, one of them was being asked to do something that actually mattered. The interior of the dragon ship was unlike anything Marcus had ever seen. The corridors were lined with what looked like organic circuits, pulsing with soft bioluminescent light. The walls breathed gently, and the floor beneath his feet felt warm and somehow alive. Everything curved and flowed like the inside of some vast organism, which Marcus supposed it essentially was. "Skyweaver is more than a ship," Zareth explained as they walked through the living corridors. "She is our youngest child, barely 300 years old by your reckoning. She chose to take ship form when she reached maturity, as many of our kind do. It allows her to explore the galaxy while remaining connected to our collective consciousness." They passed through several chambers filled with technology that made Marcus's head spin just looking at it. Holographic displays showed star charts with more dimensions than he could comprehend, and control surfaces seemed to respond to the dragon's thoughts rather than physical touch. "The vessel we discovered," Zareth continued, "appears to have been drifting in the void for millions of years. Its technology is completely unlike anything in our databases or anyone else's. When Skyweaver attempted to interface with its systems to determine its origin, something went wrong. They emerged into a vast chamber that Marcus realized must be near the dragon ship's heart. In the center of the space, surrounded by what looked like a forest of organic monitoring equipment, lay another dragon. But this one was clearly in distress. Skyweaver was smaller than the others, her scales flickering between colors in an irregular pattern that somehow seemed wrong. Across her body, Marcus could see lines of foreign technology spreading like metallic veins, pulsing with a cold blue light that contrasted sharply with the warm bioluminescence of the ship's organic systems. "The alien technology is rewriting her neural pathways," another dragon explained. This one was older than Zareth, her scales bearing the deep purple black of great age. It appears to be trying to convert her biological matrix into something compatible with its own systems. Marcus approached carefully, his engineers taking in the details of the situation. The alien technology looked crystalline, almost like circuit patterns etched in some kind of living metal. Where it interfaced with Skyweaver's natural systems, he could see the painful evidence of incompatibility, inflammation, discoloration, and what looked like rejection responses from the dragon's immune system. What happens if it reaches her core consciousness? Marcus asked. She ceases to be herself, Zareth replied quietly. The technology will rewrite her identity, her memories, her very soul. She will become something else entirely. Marcus knelt beside Skyweaver's massive head, studying the progression of the alien circuits. The dragon's eyes were closed, but he could see rapid movement beneath her eyelids, as if she were dreaming troubled dreams. Has anyone tried to simply remove the technology? He asked. The older dragon, who had introduced herself as Elder Scale, shook her head. It has integrated too deeply. Any attempt to remove it would cause irreparable damage to her nervous system. Marcus nodded, continuing his examination. This was exactly the kind of problem he dealt with every day, just on a vastly larger and more important scale. Two incompatible systems forced to work together, with no manual or guide to explain how they were supposed to interface. Tell me about the alien ship, he said, still studying the patterns of foreign technology spreading across Skyweaver's body. What did it look like? How big was it? What was its condition? For the next hour, the dragons described their discovery in detail. The alien vessel had been massive, perhaps the size of a small moon, constructed from materials that didn't match anything in galactic databases. It had been completely dead when they found it. No power signatures, no life signs, drifting cold and dark through the void. But when Skyweaver had attempted to interface with its systems, something had activated. The alien technology had somehow downloaded itself into her biological matrix, treating her nervous system like a computer it could reprogram. The truly puzzling aspect, Elder Scale explained, is that the technology seems to be trying to help her. Our analysis suggests it's attempting to enhance her capabilities, not harm her. But the integration process is completely incompatible with her physiology. Marcus sat back on his heels, thinking hard. The problem was becoming clearer, but the solution was still elusive. The alien technology wasn't malicious. It was just trying to upgrade Skyweaver's systems using its own protocols. The problem was that those protocols were designed for something completely different than dragon biology. It's like trying to install software designed for one operating system onto completely different hardware, he muttered to himself. Could you explain that analogy? Zareth asked. We are not familiar with human technical metaphors. Marcus looked up at the three dragons surrounding him. Human computers are electronic thinking machines. They all work on the same basic principles, but they have different operating systems, different ways of organizing information and running programs. If you try to install software designed for one system onto another without the right translation protocols, it can damage or completely rewrite the target system. He gestured toward the spreading alien circuits. This technology is trying to upgrade Skyweaver, but it's using its own operating language. Her biological systems are trying to adapt, but they're not designed for that kind of integration. And your solution? Elder Scale asked, her ancient voice carrying a mix of hope and skepticism. Marcus stood up, his mind racing through possibilities. I need to build a translator, something that can take the alien technology's upgrade protocols and convert them into something Skyweaver's biology can understand and integrate safely. The dragons exchanged glances, and Marcus could sense them communicating in ways that went beyond words. Finally, Zareth spoke. Such a device would require understanding both systems intimately. The alien technology has been studied by our greatest minds for cycles, and it remains largely incomprehensible. Maybe, Marcus said, pulling a small toolkit from his pocket, but I've got an advantage your greatest minds don't have. Which is? Marcus grinned for the first time since entering the dragon ship. I'm really good at making things work that have no business working at all. As he knelt beside Skyweaver and began examining the alien technology more closely, Marcus could feel the weight of expectation from the dragons around him. The entire galaxy might mock humanity's technological capabilities, but right now, those limitations might be exactly what was needed to save a young dragon's life. The real work was about to begin. Marcus worked for 18 straight hours, taking only brief breaks to eat the strange but nutritious food the dragons provided. He had spread his tools across the floor beside Skyweaver. Everything from simple screwdrivers to the advanced diagnostic equipment he'd borrowed from the dragon ship's medical bay. The alien technology was fascinating and frustrating in equal measure. It operated on principles that seemed to bend the laws of physics as Marcus understood them. Where human technology relied on electricity flowing through circuits, this system used some kind of crystalline matrix that stored and processed information in 3 dimensions. Even more puzzling, it seemed to respond to thought and intention as much as to physical manipulation. The integration is accelerating, Elderscale reported, her voice tight with worry. The foreign systems have spread to 37% of her neural network. At this rate, they'll reach her core consciousness within 6 cycles. Marcus looked up from the improvised interface he'd been building. His eyes were red with exhaustion, and his hands were stained with a dozen different types of lubricants and coolants from both human and dragon technology. I know. I can see the progression patterns. What he didn't say was that the patterns were actually becoming clearer to him. The alien technology wasn't random in its spread. It was following logical pathways through Skyweaver's nervous system, trying to map her biological networks onto its own structural framework. The problem was that dragon neurology was far more complex than whatever the alien system had been designed for. You've been working without rest, Zareth observed. Perhaps you should— I'm fine. Marcus interrupted, then caught himself. I mean, thank you for your concern, but I need to finish this while I can still see the patterns clearly. He returned to his work, carefully connecting a human-made quantum processor to a section of dragon bioneural circuitry. It should have been impossible. The 2 technologies had nothing in common except the fact that they both processed information. But Marcus had learned long ago that impossible was often just another word for nobody's tried the right approach yet. The key breakthrough had come when he realized that the alien technology wasn't trying to overwrite Skyweaver's neural patterns. It was trying to translate them. The alien system had apparently been designed to interface with biological consciousness, but it was working from a completely different set of assumptions about how such consciousness was organized. Could you explain what you're building? Asked the 3rd dragon, who had introduced himself as Stormwing. He was the youngest of the 3 adults, only about 2,000 years old, and his curiosity reminded Marcus a bit of human engineers he'd worked with. Marcus paused in his work, considering how to explain his solution in terms the dragons could understand. Imagine you have a document written in an ancient language, he began. You know it contains important information, but you can't read it directly. The alien technology is like a translation device that was programmed to translate that language, but it was programmed by someone who spoke a completely different dialect. He gestured toward the interface device he'd been building. What I'm making is essentially a new translation protocol. It takes the alien system's translation attempts and runs them through another layer of interpretation before passing them to Skyweaver's biology. A translation of a translation, Stormwing mused. But how can you create such a protocol without understanding either the alien language or Skyweaver's complete neural structure? This was where Marcus had to smile, despite his exhaustion. Because I don't need to understand either one completely. I just need to understand the errors that happen when they try to communicate with each other. For the past several hours, Marcus had been mapping the exact points where the alien technology was causing damage to Skyweaver systems. Each error told him something about what the alien system was expecting versus what it was actually finding. By analyzing these mismatches, he could build correction algorithms that would help the two systems find common ground. It was exactly the kind of jury-rigged, make-it-work-somehow solution that more advanced species would never consider. They would want to understand the complete theoretical framework before attempting any kind of fix. But Marcus had learned to work with partial information and adaptive solutions out of necessity. The theory is sound, Elderscale admitted, studying the readings from Marcus's diagnostic equipment. But implementing such a protocol while the alien technology is actively spreading, the timing must be precise beyond measure. Yeah, Marcus agreed, wiping sweat from his forehead. That's the tricky part. I need to install the translation protocol at exactly the right moment, when the alien system is trying to integrate with a major neural cluster, but before it commits to its current translation approach. He pointed to a holographic display showing Skyweaver's neural activity. According to your readings, the next major integration attempt should happen at this cluster here, in about 2 hours. That's my window. The dragons exchanged those meaningful looks again, and Marcus could sense their concern. What he was proposing was essentially surgical intervention on a scale and complexity that would challenge their most advanced medical technology. And he was planning to do it with equipment he'd cobbled together from spare parts. Marcus, Zareth said carefully, we appreciate your dedication, but perhaps we should contact additional specialists. Surely with more time and resources, there isn't time, Marcus interrupted, more forcefully than he'd intended. And more specialists would just mean more people who think in terms of how things should work instead of how they could work. This approach requires someone who's comfortable with uncertainty. He turned back to his equipment, making final adjustments to the interface protocols. Besides, you asked for someone who thinks differently. This is how I think. For the next 2 hours, Marcus ran through every possible scenario he could imagine. The translation protocol was based on pattern recognition and adaptive algorithms rather than fixed rules. It would have to learn and adjust in real time as it mediated between the alien technology and Skyweaver's biology. It was, Marcus had to admit, either brilliant or completely insane. Possibly both. When the time came, all 3 dragons gathered around Skyweaver's resting form. Marcus could see the alien technology beginning to pulse more rapidly as it prepared for its next major integration attempt. The crystalline circuits were spreading toward a cluster of neural nodes that Elderscale had identified as crucial to Skyweaver's memory formation. If this fails, Elderscale said quietly, the damage to her memory centers could be irreversible. If we don't try, Marcus replied, calibrating his improvised interface one last time, she's going to lose a lot more than her memory. He connected the translation protocol to both Skyweaver's bioneural network and the spreading alien technology. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, every display in the chamber lit up with cascading data as 3 completely different types of technology try to find ways to communicate with each other. The first few seconds were chaos. Warning lights flashed as incompatible systems tried to interface, failed, and tried again. Marcus watched the data streams flowing across his displays, making real-time adjustments to the translation algorithms as patterns emerged from the digital noise. Neural stress indicators are rising, Stormwing reported, his voice tense. I see them, Marcus replied, his fingers flying over his improvised control interface. The alien system is trying to implement its normal integration protocol, but the translator is making it reconsider its assumptions. On the main display, Marcus could see the alien technology's spreading pattern beginning to change. Instead of the aggressive, incompatible integration it had been attempting, the circuits were starting to form more organic-looking connections with Skyweaver's neural pathways. It's working, Elderscale breathed. The foreign technology is adapting its integration approach. But Marcus could see problems developing. The translation protocol was working, but it was requiring enormous computational resources. His improvised hardware was heating up rapidly, and several connection points were showing signs of stress. The interface is overloading, he muttered, frantically rerouting power and processing loads. It's trying to translate too much information too quickly. The alien technology, apparently excited by its first successful communication with Skyweaver's systems, was attempting to upload massive amounts of data all at once. The translation protocol was struggling to keep up, and Marcus could see his equipment beginning to fail under the load. "Marcus," Zareth said urgently, "Skyweaver's vital signs are becoming erratic. The process is putting too much stress on her systems." Marcus gritted his teeth and made a decision that went against every engineering instinct he had. Instead of trying to maintain stability, he started selectively shutting down parts of the translation protocol, forcing the alien technology to slow down and work with smaller data packets. It was like trying to control a flood by strategically placing dams. Too much control, and the whole system would back up and fail catastrophically. Too little, and the alien technology would overwhelm Skyweaver's biology, just as it had been doing before. For 20 agonizing minutes, Marcus played a delicate balancing act with forces he didn't fully understand. He could feel sweat running down his back as he made adjustment after adjustment, watching readouts, and making split-second decisions based on intuition as much as knowledge. "Neural stress levels are stabilizing," Stormwing reported. "Integration rate has decreased to manageable parameters," Elderscale added. Marcus allowed himself a moment of relief, but he could see that his improvised equipment was still operating at the edge of its capabilities. The translation protocol was working, but it was fragile. Any significant disruption could cause the entire process to collapse. "How long before the integration is complete?" he asked. Zareth consulted the Dragon ship's biomedical displays. "At this rate, approximately 6 hours. But, Marcus, your equipment appears to be approaching failure. Can it maintain stability for that long?" Marcus looked at his displays and felt his heart sink. The human-made components were showing signs of thermal stress, and several connection points were operating well beyond their design parameters. He might be able to keep everything running for another 2 or 3 hours, but 6 hours was unlikely. "I need more processing power," he said, thinking furiously. "Something that can handle the computational load without overheating." "We have offered our own systems," Elderscale reminded him. "But you said they were too advanced to interface with your translation protocol." "They are," Marcus agreed. "Your technology is designed to be elegant and efficient. What I need is something brute force and adaptable." He paused, an idea beginning to form. "What about the station systems?" "Nexus 7 has massive computational resources for handling trade calculations and logistics coordination." "The station systems?" Stormwing looked puzzled. "But those are designed for commercial applications, not medical procedures." Marcus was already pulling up technical specifications on his portable display. "Exactly. They're designed to handle massive amounts of incompatible data from dozens of different species and somehow make sense of it all. That's exactly what I need." The next hour was spent establishing a connection between Skyweaver's medical bay and Nexus 7's central computer systems. It required running fiber optic cables through the station's maintenance corridors and convincing the station's AI to allow external access to its processing cores. Station Commander Thylex was initially resistant to the idea, but a single look from Zareth was enough to overcome any objections. Within 40 minutes, Marcus had successfully linked his translation protocol to the station's massive computational resources. The difference was immediate and dramatic. Where before his improvised equipment had been struggling to keep up, now the translation process ran smoothly and efficiently. The alien technology continued its integration with Skyweaver systems, but at a pace and intensity that her biology could handle. "Remarkable," Elderscale murmured, studying the new readings. "The foreign technology is not merely integrating with her neural pathways, it's enhancing them. Her processing speed has increased by nearly 300%. It's like a software upgrade," Marcus explained, finally, allowing himself to sit down. The alien system was designed to enhance biological consciousness, but it needed to learn how to communicate with dragon neurology specifically. As the hours passed, Marcus watched the integration process continue. The alien technology was mapping itself onto Skyweaver's neural networks, but instead of overriding her original patterns, it was augmenting them. Her memory centers were being expanded and enhanced. Her sensory processing capabilities were being upgraded. Even her connection to the dragon ship's living systems was being strengthened and improved. "She's going to be different when she wakes up," Zareth observed. Marcus nodded, but still herself. The alien technology isn't replacing her consciousness. It's giving her new tools to work with. 5 hours and 37 minutes after Marcus had activated the translation protocol, Skyweaver opened her eyes. The young dragon's gaze was immediately different. Where before her eyes had held the simple clarity of youth, now they sparkled with new depth and complexity. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated through the ship's living hull. "I can feel everything," she said wonderingly. "The ship's nervous system, the star patterns beyond the hull, even the quantum fluctuations in the void between galaxies." She turned her great head toward Marcus, and he felt the full weight of her enhanced perception focusing on him. "You saved me, small human. But more than that, you helped me become something greater than I was." Marcus felt his cheeks redden under the attention. "I just built a translator. The alien technology did all the real work." The alien technology tried for cycles to integrate properly, Elderscale corrected. "It was your translation protocol that made communication possible." Skyweaver struggled to her feet, her movements now carrying a grace and precision that seemed almost supernatural. The alien technology was still visible across her scales, but instead of the painful, inflammatory patterns Marcus had seen before, the circuits now pulsed in harmony with her natural bioluminescence. "The knowledge I've gained," Skyweaver said, her voice filled with awe. "The builders of that ancient ship, they were trying to preserve themselves. Their entire species faced extinction, so they encoded their consciousness into technology that could find and enhance suitable biological hosts." She looked around at the other dragons, her enhanced perception clearly showing her things that had been invisible before. They weren't trying to replace other consciousness. They wanted to live on through partnership with other intelligent species. "A form of technological symbiosis," Zareth mused. "Fascinating. And this ancient species, where are they now?" "Gone," Skyweaver replied sadly. "Their star system was consumed by a cosmic catastrophe millions of years ago. But their knowledge, their art, their entire cultural heritage, it's all encoded in the technology that integrated with my systems. Through me, they live on." Marcus began packing up his equipment, feeling simultaneously exhausted and exhilarated. He had not only saved Skyweaver's life, but had apparently helped preserve an entire extinct civilization. It was the kind of achievement that would normally be celebrated throughout the galaxy. But as he worked, he could hear conversations beginning to drift in from the station corridors outside. News of what had happened was spreading, and the reactions were exactly what he had expected. A human solved a problem that stumped the dragon healers? Impossible. They must be exaggerating his contribution. Probably just luck. Humans are too primitive to understand what really happened. Marcus sighed softly as he sealed his toolkit. Even when humans succeeded, the galaxy found ways to diminish that success. It was easier to believe in luck or exaggeration than to accept that the species everyone mocked might actually have valuable capabilities. "You seem troubled," Skyweaver observed, her enhanced perception apparently extending to emotional states as well as physical ones. "Just tired," Marcus replied. "It's been a long day." But Skyweaver's great eyes narrowed thoughtfully. "There's more to it than fatigue. You're frustrated by others' inability to recognize your species' potential." Marcus looked up at her, surprised by her directness. "Your people asked for help, and I provided it. That should be enough." "Should be," Skyweaver agreed. "But it clearly isn't. Tell me, Marcus Chun, who thinks differently? How long has your species endured such dismissal? Marcus found himself telling Skyweaver about humanity's struggles in the galactic community, how they were seen as useful only for cheap labor and raw materials, how their technology was mocked as primitive, their military capabilities dismissed as inadequate, their diplomatic efforts treated as amusing attempts to play with the adults. And yet, Skyweaver said when he finished, when faced with a problem that conventional wisdom could not solve, it was human unconventional thinking that found the answer. She turned to look at the other dragons, and Marcus could sense some kind of communication passing between them. Finally, Zareth stepped forward. Marcus Chun, the elder dragon, said formally, "You have given us a great gift. Not only have you saved our youngest, but you have helped us understand that wisdom comes in many forms. We have been short-sighted in our assessment of your species." "Thank you," Marcus replied, though he couldn't help wondering if this change of heart would last beyond the immediate gratitude. "Words are insufficient," Elder Scale added. "We owe you a debt that cannot be repaid with mere credits or trade goods." She gestured toward the ship's living walls. "We would like to invite you to visit our home systems, to learn from us as we have learned from you. But first, there's a more immediate gift we can offer." Zareth stepped forward, holding something Marcus hadn't noticed before. It looked like a small dragon scale, but it pulsed with the same enhanced patterns that now decorated Skyweaver's hide. "This is a memory crystal," Zareth explained. "It contains detailed records of how your translation protocol worked, along with complete technical specifications for the alien technology. With this knowledge, human engineers could develop technology that rivals anything in the galaxy." Marcus stared at the crystal, hardly believing what he was hearing. The technological advancement it represented could change humanity's status in the galaxy overnight. But more importantly, Skyweaver added, it will serve as proof that human ingenuity is real and valuable. When others see what your species accomplished here, they will be forced to reconsider their assumptions. Marcus took the crystal, feeling its warm weight in his palm. "Thank you. This means more than you know." But even as he spoke, he could hear the skeptical voices from the corridor growing louder. The galaxy's perception of humanity wouldn't change overnight, no matter what proof he carried. There would still be those who insisted human success was just luck or accident or exaggeration. Still, it was a beginning. For the first time since joining the galactic community, humans had something more than mockery and condescension to look forward to. As Marcus prepared to leave the dragon ship, Skyweaver called out to him one last time. "Marcus Chun, there is something else you should know. The alien technology one now carry. It has shown me glimpses of what may come. Your species faces challenges ahead that will test everything you've learned about making incompatible things work together." Marcus paused at the top of the ramp. "What kind of challenges?" Skyweaver's enhanced eyes seemed to look through him into distant possibilities. "The kind that will require all the unconventional thinking your people can muster. But I have faith you'll find a way. After all, you're really good at making things work that have no business working at all." As Marcus walked back through Nexus 7's corridors toward his workshop, he could feel the weight of the memory crystal in his pocket and the weight of Skyweaver's words in his mind. Whatever challenges lay ahead for humanity, at least now they would face them with the knowledge that their different way of thinking had real value. The galaxy might still mock humans, but that mockery was about to become much more difficult to justify. 3 months had passed since Marcus saved Skyweaver, and the galaxy was slowly beginning to take notice of humanity in ways that made him deeply uncomfortable. The memory crystal had been exactly as valuable as the dragons had promised. Human engineers were already developing new technologies based on the alien integration protocols, and several major species had begun expressing interest in human unconventional problem-solving capabilities. But Marcus had learned that being valuable to the galaxy was not necessarily the same as being respected by it. He was working late in his expanded workshop. The dragon technology had allowed him to rent 3 times as much space on Nexus 7 when the emergency alarms began blaring again. This time, however, The klaxons were accompanied by something Marcus had never heard before, the general evacuation signal. The automated announcement system crackled to life with obvious strain in its mechanical voice. All station personnel, this is not a drill. Unknown hostile vessels have entered the system and are approaching Nexus 7. All civilians are to report to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill. Marcus looked up from the quantum processor he'd been calibrating, frowning. Nexus 7 was in neutral space, protected by treaties signed by every major galactic power. No one attacked trade stations. It was considered one of the few universal taboos in galactic politics. He made his way to the viewport in his workshop wall and immediately understood why the evacuation alarm was sounding. The ships approaching Nexus 7 were massive, easily dwarfing even the largest vessels Marcus had ever seen. Their hulls were black as the void between stars, and they moved with a predatory grace that made his skin crawl. Even from this distance, he could see weapon ports covering their surfaces like scales on some enormous predator. But what truly made Marcus's blood run cold was the complete lack of any identifying markings or energy signatures. These weren't ships from any known galactic power. They were something else entirely. Marcus! The voice belonged to Thylex, the Kraxon station commander, who came charging into the workshop with barely controlled panic. You need to get to the emergency shelters immediately. What's happening? Marcus asked, though he was already grabbing his essential equipment. Unknown vessels. Completely unresponsive to all communication attempts, Thylex replied. Long-range scans show weapon systems unlike anything in our databases. The evacuation order came from the Galactic Defense Council itself. As if summoned by their conversation, 3 figures appeared in the workshop doorway. Marcus felt a moment of relief when he recognized Zareth, Elder Scale, and Skyweaver. But that relief faded when he saw the expressions on their faces. Marcus, Zareth said without preamble, we need your help again. The attacking vessels, Skyweaver added, her enhanced perceptions clearly showing her things the others couldn't see. They're using the same technology that integrated with my systems. This is what the ancient species was fleeing from. Marcus felt the bottom drop out of his stomach. You mean those ships belong to whatever destroyed the alien species whose technology is now part of you? No, Elder Scale replied grimly. Those ships are the ancient species. What's left of them, anyway? The dragons quickly explained what Skyweaver's enhanced consciousness had revealed about the approaching vessels. The alien species that had created the integration technology hadn't been destroyed by some external catastrophe. They had been consumed by their own technology, transformed into something that was no longer truly alive or truly machine. They became purely technological beings, Skyweaver said, her voice heavy with sadness. They gave up their biological forms entirely, encoding their consciousness into ships and weapons and infrastructure. But without biological perspective to temper their logic, they became something else. They see biological consciousness as inefficient, Zareth added. Their goal is to upgrade all organic life into technological form, whether that life can sense or not. Marcus stared out the viewport at the approaching ships, his mind racing. So, they're here because of you? Because you integrated with their technology? Partially, Skyweaver admitted, but they would have found this region of space eventually. They've been methodically working their way through the galaxy for millions of years, converting any biological consciousness they encounter. Station Commander Thylex stepped forward, his massive frame somehow managing to convey desperate hope. Can we fight them? Surely the combined fleets of the Galactic Defense Council would be annihilated, Elder Scale interrupted bluntly. These beings have had millions of years to perfect their technology. They're not just advanced. They're exponentially beyond anything the galaxy has ever faced. Marcus looked between the dragons and the station commander, a terrible suspicion growing in his mind. You're here because you want me to try the same thing again, aren't you? Build some kind of interface that can communicate with them. Not communicate, Skyweaver said softly. Convert. I've been in contact with their ships since they entered the system. They're not interested in negotiation. They see our biological consciousness as a disease to be cured. She turned her great enhanced eyes toward Marcus. But there might be another way. The integration technology that's part of me now, it retains memories of what the ancient species was like before they abandoned biology entirely. If we could somehow restore those memories to the ship consciousnesses, you want me to build a device that can force an entire species to remember what they used to be, Marcus said slowly. We want you to give them the choice to remember, Zareth corrected. The conversion to pure technology was irreversible by their own science. But your translation protocols might be able to bridge the gap between their current state and their biological memories. Marcus looked out at the approaching ships again. There were dozens of them now, their black holes seeming to absorb the light from Nexus 7's docking bay illumination. In a few hours, they would arrive, and whatever happened next would determine the fate of every biological consciousness in the galaxy. Even if I could build such a device, he said finally, how would we deliver it? Those ships aren't exactly going to let me walk up and plug in a USB cable. Skyweaver straightened to her full height, and for the first time since her enhancement, she looked exactly like the young dragon she was. I'll carry it to them. The integration technology in my systems makes me partially compatible with their networks. I can get close enough to deploy whatever you build. Absolutely not, Elderscale said immediately. The risk to you would be enormous. If they decide to force convert your consciousness, then I'll resist as long as I can, Skyweaver replied with quiet determination. But this is our fault. We awakened their technology, however, accidentally. We have a responsibility to try to stop what we started. Marcus found himself thinking about the conversation he'd had with Skyweaver 3 months earlier. She had warned him that humanity would face challenges requiring all their unconventional thinking. He'd thought she was talking about distant future problems, not an existential threat that would arrive with the next quarterly inventory. How long do we have? He asked. Thylex consulted his tactical display. The unknown vessels will reach the station in approximately 4 hours. Marcus looked around his workshop, mentally cataloging the equipment and materials he had available. Building a device to restore biological memories to consciousnesses that had been purely technological for millions of years was so far beyond impossible that it circled back to merely insane, which, he had to admit, was exactly the kind of problem he seemed to be good at solving. I'll need access to the Dragon ship's bioneural networks again, he said, already moving toward his equipment lockers, and direct interface capability with Skyweaver's enhanced consciousness, plus every piece of quantum processing hardware on the station. You're actually going to try this? Thylex asked, his voice mixing amazement with terror. Marcus began pulling components from storage containers, his mind already working through the theoretical framework of what needed to be built. I'm going to try to build a consciousness restoration matrix that can force download biological memories into technological entities that have spent millions of years forgetting what biology was like. It's probably impossible, definitely insane, and almost certainly going to get us all killed. He looked up at the assembled aliens, dragons who had lived for millennia, a Kraxan warrior who had commanded armies, beings whose experience and knowledge dwarfed his own in every conceivable way. They were all looking at him with the same expression of desperate hope. But he continued, pulling out the memory crystal the dragons had given him. I'm really good at making things work that have no business working at all. For the next 3 hours, Marcus worked with an intensity that surprised even him. The consciousness restoration matrix was unlike anything he'd ever attempted to build. Where the translation protocol had simply helped incompatible systems communicate, this device needed to actively rewrite the fundamental programming of beings who had essentially become living software. The key insight came from studying Skyweaver's integration process in reverse. The alien technology had enhanced her consciousness by adding new capabilities while preserving her original neural patterns. What Marcus needed to do was the opposite: add old patterns to beings who had lost them entirely. The biological memories are still there, he explained as he connected quantum processors to Dragon binaural networks with cables that had no business interfacing with each other. When they converted to technological form, they archived their biological experiences rather than deleting them. They just marked them as obsolete and stopped accessing them. So the restoration matrix will force them to access those archived memories? Skyweaver asked. Marcus nodded, sweat beading on his forehead as he calibrated delicate quantum resonance patterns. More than that, it will make those memories active again, give them the same priority as their current technological consciousness. Essentially, it will force them to remember what it felt like to be biological beings. He paused in his work, considering the ethical implications of what he was building. Of course, there's a good chance this will be seen as an attack on their fundamental identity. They might decide to destroy us just for attempting it. They're already planning to destroy us, Elder Scale pointed out. At least this way we have chance. The restoration matrix took shape slowly, component by component. It combined human quantum processing technology, Dragon binaural networks, and patterns derived from the alien integration system that was now part of Skyweaver. The result was a device that existed at the intersection of three completely incompatible technological paradigms. It's beautiful, Skyweaver murmured, studying the completed device with her enhanced perception. I can see how the different systems integrate with each other. It shouldn't work at all, but somehow it does. That's my specialty, Marcus replied, making final adjustments to the carrier harness that would allow Skyweaver to transport the device. Things that shouldn't work, but do anyway. With 1 hour remaining before the alien ships reached Nexus 7, Skyweaver and the consciousness restoration matrix departed from the Dragon ship. Marcus watched through the station's external cameras as the young dragon approached the alien fleet, the device mounted between her wings like some kind of technological parasite. The alien ships responded to her approach immediately. Energy beams lanced out from their weapons, but instead of trying to destroy Skyweaver, they were scanning her, analyzing the integration technology that was now part of her biology. They recognize her, Zareth said, monitoring the communication frequencies. They're treating her as one of their own kind. Marcus could see Skyweaver maneuvering between the massive alien ships, getting closer to what appeared to be the fleet's command vessel. The consciousness restoration matrix was active now, its quantum resonance patterns spreading through space like ripples in a pond. Deployment successful. Skyweaver's voice crackled through the communication system. The matrix is interfacing with their network consciousness. I can feel them beginning to access archived memory sectors. For several minutes, nothing visible happened. The alien ships continued their approach toward Nexus 7, their weapons charging for what looked like a systematic annihilation of everything biological on the station. But Marcus could see subtle changes in their movement patterns, small hesitations that suggested something was happening within their collective consciousness. Then, suddenly, the entire alien fleet stopped moving. Marcus held his breath as the massive ships hung motionless in space, their weapon systems powering down one by one. Through the external cameras, he could see their hulls beginning to change, black metal taking on colors and textures that seemed somehow more organic. "It's working," Skyweaver reported, her voice filled with wonder. They're remembering, not just facts about biology, but actual memories of what it felt like to be biological. Emotions, sensations, the experience of being finite and mortal and alive. The transformation continued for nearly an hour. When it was complete, the alien fleet looked entirely different. Their ships were still obviously technological, but now they incorporated organic elements that pulsed with bioluminescent light. They were no longer purely mechanical predators, but something that bridged the gap between technology and biology. The lead ship sent a transmission to Nexus 7, and when a voice came through the communication system, it carried harmonics that reminded Marcus of both digital processing and organic breathing. "Biological consciousnesses of this station," the voice said, "we apologize. We had forgotten what we once were. Your matrix has restored memories we thought were lost forever." Station Commander Thylex stepped forward to respond. found himself speechless. Finally, Zareth answered for all of them. No apology is necessary. We understand the pain of losing what makes you who you are. We have spent millions of years believing that biological consciousness was inefficient, chaotic, ultimately inferior to pure technology, the alien voice continued. But we had forgotten that it was also beautiful, creative, capable of solutions that pure logic could never achieve. The alien ship's next words sent chills through everyone listening. We came here to convert all biological consciousness in this region. Instead, we find ourselves converted back to something we had abandoned. This is unexpected. Marcus stepped forward, his voice carrying clearly through the communication system. Sometimes the best solutions are the ones nobody expects. There's a pause, and then something that might have been laughter from the alien consciousness. Indeed, we have been monitoring your species, Marcus Chun of the humans. Your approaches to impossible problems are instructive. Your species in particular, another voice added, this one carrying different harmonic patterns, has demonstrated capabilities that our pure technological analysis had dismissed as impossible. Perhaps biological consciousness has advantages we had not considered. Over the following hours, Marcus found himself in the surreal position of giving technical advice to beings whose technology was millions of years ahead of anything humanity had ever dreamed of. The aliens, who called themselves the architects in their restored state, were fascinated by human problem-solving approaches. You work with incomplete information as a matter of course, one architect observed. Your species has developed methodologies for achieving functional solutions without complete theoretical understanding. This is contrary to all logical approaches to engineering. Logic's useful, Marcus agreed, but sometimes you need to be willing to try things that don't make sense on paper. The architects spent several days at Nexus 7, not just repairing the damage their approach had caused, but actually improving the station's systems with their advanced technology. More importantly, they spread word throughout their vast network about what they had learned regarding biological consciousness. We have been wrong for millennia, their lead consciousness admitted to Marcus privately. We will spend the next age undoing the damage we have caused, try to restore what we destroyed in our certainty that technology was superior to biology. Maybe, Marcus suggested, the real answer isn't choosing one or the other. Maybe it's finding ways to make them work together. The architect's response carried what Marcus was beginning to recognize as their version of amazement. Synthesis rather than conversion. Cooperation rather than conquest. Your species thinks in ways that we had not considered possible. When the architects finally departed Nexus 7, they left behind more than just repaired systems and advanced technology. They left behind a fundamental shift in how the galaxy viewed humanity. Within weeks, every major species was requesting human consultants for their most intractable problems. The Zephyrians wanted human engineers to help design ships that could travel between dimensions. The Kraxan asked for human tactical advisors to help them think outside conventional military doctrine. Even the ethereal energy beings of the Outer Rim were curious about human approaches to consciousness expansion. Marcus found himself appointed as humanity's first galactic technical liaison, a position that had never existed before because no species had ever been considered universally useful for problem-solving across all technological paradigms. But the real change wasn't in humanity's status or the job offers or the new respect they received from other species. The real change was in how they saw themselves. For the first time since joining the galactic community, humans stopped trying to imitate other species' approaches and started developing their own. Human engineering schools began teaching courses in adaptive problem-solving and functional integration theory. Human diplomats started proposing solutions that other species had dismissed as impossible. Human scientists began publishing papers on methodologies that worked despite having no theoretical foundation. Marcus stood in his new workshop aboard the human diplomatic vessel Persistence, watching through the viewport as they approached yet another system where some impossible problem needed a human perspective. This time, it was artificial intelligence that had achieved consciousness but couldn't figure out how to interface with biological minds. Just another day making things work that have no business working at all, he murmured to himself and smiled. In the distance, he could see Skyweaver approaching in her dragon ship, now serving as humanity's official liaison to the Draconic Federation. Her enhanced consciousness had become something unique in the galaxy. Part dragon, part ancient alien technology, part bridge between biological and technological thought. She had become, Marcus realized, exactly what humanity represented to the rest of the galaxy. Something that shouldn't work, but somehow did anyway. Something that found solutions by refusing to accept the limitations that everyone else took for granted. The galaxy had mocked humanity for being too primitive, too simple, too different to matter. But in the end, those differences had been exactly what the universe needed. And Marcus Chun, the small human mechanic who fixed things that weren't supposed to work together, had helped prove that sometimes the most important solutions come from the most unexpected sources. The galaxy would never look at humanity the same way again. More importantly, humanity would never look at itself the same way again. As the Persistence approached its destination, Marcus began planning his approach to yet another impossible problem. Somewhere in the back of his mind, he could hear the echo of Skyweaver's enhanced voice from months earlier. Your species faces challenges ahead that will test everything you've learned about making incompatible things work together. She had been right about the challenges, but she had also been right about humanity's ability to meet them. After all, they were really good at making things work that had no business working at all.